Hey, and welcome back to the Fantasy Football Profits. Guys, today we're going to go over our Tier 2 wide receiver rankings. Rob will get to what Tier 2 wide receivers are in a second, but it's going to be a pretty simple video. As always, there will be timestamps down in the description below, so you can hop around to whichever players you want. I do have to apologize. Last video I said there would be timestamps, and there wasn't. That was just a bit of a miscommunication. We got all the video filmed and recorded and ready. Rob uploaded it, but I was actually gone. I wasn't ready to make those adjustments, and so I actually just ended up forgetting about it. But they'll be back for this video. My apologies for that. Let's not waste any time. As always, guys, make sure to follow us on Instagram and check out our website for way more content. But let's just get right into it. All right, so here we got Rob. You were going to talk about Adam Thielen, but first, a little clarification, right? This is like number one, first guy in Tier 2. This is kicking us off. So what exactly is this Tier 2? And Tier 2 is pretty much just guys who are just shy of Tier 1. So Tier 1 are guys that you can trust no matter what. Barring injury to them or their quarterback, they are going to be elite. They're going to be top in the charts with some insane numbers. A lot of these Tier 2 guys, like an Adam Thielen, are so close to being Tier 2. However, because Tier 1 being without a shadow of a doubt elite, any minor concern can bump you into Tier 2, despite these guys having Tier 1 potential and very well could finish Tier 1. Adam Thielen is a perfect example of this.
Yeah, I really struggle with him. I wanted to put him Tier 1. We went back and forth. We talked about it. Ultimately, he landed in Tier 2 right on the bubble there. So why is he not Tier 1? We'll talk about why he's not Tier 1. Then I'm going to get into why this guy's amazing. You can trust him, and he's a stud wide receiver. One reason why he's not Tier 1 is Stefon Diggs. If you follow Stefon Diggs or the Vikings, what you find is Stefon Diggs is very talented. He's capable of being a number 1 wide receiver. And so those targets get spread out. I think not just him, but if you look at, they also have Dalvin Cook. Dalvin Cook had 40 catches last year. He's got great hands. They drafted Irv Smith. They've got Kyle Rudolph there. I think we've seen Adam Thielen's ceiling there. So for me, I think he's a very good wide receiver, but not as high as some of those guys we've mentioned previously. Now, if you look at Adam Thielen, if you remember, this guy was undrafted. So he doesn't have the pedigree maybe that some other wide receivers that we've talked about previously or in that first video have. And at the age of 29 is not old, but it's not young anymore, I think we've seen his ceiling. So for me, Adam Thielen is this. He's very good, but he's not going to be as high as Hopkins, Brown, some other studs. Remember, he's never had double-digit touchdowns in a season there. With that said, he is undeniably a very good wide receiver, and he's a stud that you can draft and you can trust him and not worry about it at all. This guy's got a great story. Goes undrafted, comes in, he's a walk-on tryout, makes the team on the practice squad, gets bumped up to special teams, and now he's an NFL star there. Every season that he's been in the league, he's improved his targets, catches, and yards per game. He followed up his breakout season of 2016 with 1,276 receiving yards. And then he eclipsed that last year with 1,373 receiving yards. This guy's known to have great work ethic. He's very competitive. He's known to be a great teammate. He's got all the character that you want to see in any player in the NFL. Love this guy. Now, him and Kirk Cousins, so much about a wide receiver is the chemistry with the quarterback. And him and Kirk Cousins have great chemistry. In fact, if you look at the previous year when Case Keenum was there, the quarterback rating was 20 points lower than it was when Kirk Cousins came in. Once again, that quarterback rating went up 20 points just bringing Kirk Cousins in there. Now going into their second year, I think that chemistry is going to solidify. I love it there. In fact, if you take a look at his career, the quarterback rating when thrown to in his career, it's 108. That's very good. In fact, that's the same quarterback rating that Julio Jones has when thrown to there. Last season, he had the 4th best catch percentage among qualified wide receivers. That's wide receivers with over 80 targets. Pro Football Focus rated him as number 7th best wide receiver last season. Like Adam Thielen, love this guy as a Vikings fan. All I can say is Skol Vikes. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I was watching some stuff on Adam Thielen, and he was just talking about how good the chemistry is getting and talking about how in a lot of situations it can take up to 3 years to completely 100% get full chemistry with your quarterback. And so, of course, they weren't able to do it in a couple of months after Kirk Cousins was signed. There's a lot to look forward to this season, or maybe I'm just a blind Vikings fan, but I like to pretend and like to think so. So I love this pick. He's got to go here. All right, so here we got Keenan Allen. First thing we've got to address is the injuries, because if you know fantasy football, you've been around for a while, you know this guy has all the talent in the world, but he doesn't seem to have much health. Well, that's not really a concern anymore. That used to be a big problem year in and year out. He was hurt, but he's been healthy 2 straight years in a row, and he's healthy this offseason. I don't know what it was before, if he changed his diet, or maybe it was just a fluke that he kept getting injured before, but there's really no concern with that right now. So I want to put that out kind of up out front right away. I think there's really a burn bias. If you've ever owned him before and he got hurt, you probably are leaning away from him, though you shouldn't. There's really no concern. On top of that, I love the situation that he's in. Philip Rivers is a great quarterback and a very good offense. And while Hunter Henry's coming back, that's going to help that wide receiving core. They also lost Tyrell Williams, which puts even more need on Keenan Allen. And so I love the production that we can expect from him, being that they just lost a key wide receiver, a deep threat in Tyrell Williams. And although he's being replaced with Hunter Henry, the thing to know is tight ends are just different styles of wideouts, of just different style of how they go out there and how they play. And so the type of wide receiver that Keenan Allen is really much needed. Now, last year, he goes for over 100 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 7 touchdowns. It is a great season, but the numbers get even better. He actually does this every year, and I don't know what it is, but his numbers got better later in the year. In fact, he only had 1 touchdown in the first 9 weeks. 6 of his 7 touchdowns last season came week 10 or later. That number is absolutely insane. I don't know what it is, what scheme change happened. Maybe it was the Melvin Gordon injury or whatever. That definitely helps him a lot. And going back to that, that's the other thing I wanted to say. We don't know what's going on with Melvin Gordon, whether or not he's going to be playing there, if he's going to be traded. That's quite honestly what we expect. But if he gets traded, that actually boosts Keenan Allen's value so much. We saw how he performed at the end of last season when Melvin Gordon was struggling with injuries, when he was missing time. Keenan Allen was at his best. I don't know what it is, what scheme, what change that was made, but it's good for him. On top of that, he had 422 yards after catch. That's pretty solid numbers. He also finished second with 77.6% catch percentage, and he actually finished first in slot catch percentage at 81%. He also had 2.56 yards per route ran, that's 6th in the NFL, and 1.98 yards per route in the slot, that's 3rd best in the NFL. And that's one of the things I love about this guy. This is what makes this guy one of the best receivers in the NFL, one of the most talented guys out there, and a great fantasy option who's got to come in at this spot here, is that he can play the slot, he can play outside. Really the only concern with this guy is the touchdowns, but 7 last year is okay. That number could certainly go up. That's what I got to say about Keenan Allen. What do you think, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, if there's any concern, it's his health. He seems like he's healthy now. The other thing, I think he's got a little bit higher value in PPR leagues. If you look at, there's a stretch there where his catches per game was phenomenal. He had 1 year he was on pace to shatter. He was on pace to get like 140-some catches. Obviously, he wasn't going to maintain that, but once again, very good wide receiver with a very trustworthy quarterback. And Philip Rivers, another guy that I think Philip Rivers is under a lot of people's radar, very underrated there, but I like Keenan Allen. So the next guy I want to look at here is T.Y. Hilton. For me, he's a wide receiver I think that's often overlooked and underrated. Before 2017, he had 4 consecutive years over 1,000 yards receiving. In 5 of the last 6 seasons, he had about 1,000 yards receiving. And the one season he didn't hit that mark was because Andrew Luck was out, and the quarterback that was throwing the ball was
Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, so I think that tells you right there. Even that year, he hit 900 receiving yards. So very good wide receiver there. So he had a little off year the year before with Luck out, but he recovered nicely last year with 1,270 yards. But that number is even better if you consider he missed 2 games. So you take his per average, how many yards he has per average, you kind of project it over 16 games. He would have had 1,451 yards last year. It'll lift him at 5th in the NFL behind only Jones, Hopkins, Hill, and Evans. Very good numbers there. His last 4 years with Luck as quarterback, here's what his averages have been with Luck as quarterback the last 4 years when they've been on the field together. 85 yards per game. You project that over 16 games, he's averaging 1,360 yards per season. That's very good there. His best year came in 2016 where he had 91 catches, 1,448 yards, which, by the way, led all NFL wide receivers in receiving yards there. Very good. Now, one of the reasons why I like him, beyond his talent, is often a wide receiver is only as good as their quarterback, and Andrew Luck is as good as it gets. Look at the last 4 years. Andrew Luck has averaged 2.31 touchdown passes per game. Over 16 games, it turns out to be 37 touchdown passes in a season. That's better than Aaron Rodgers, who during that same stretch has averaged 2.11 touchdown passes per game. When I look at him, I think he's a wide receiver that I would say has he's a very good wide receiver with a very high floor, but I do think his ceiling is somewhat limited, and that's why he's not tier 1. And I think the reason why you can't put him with the players that we talked about Hopkins, some of those guys, is him along with players like Bradin Cooks. They're not possession-type receivers. They're not that sort of body. It's not how they play. With their style of play, their touchdowns will be a little bit lower, as evidenced by the fact he's never hit double-digit touchdowns in a season. But I love his situation. I love the quarterback. They got an improved offensive line. They've got an improved running game. They got 2 good tight ends. Well, I think that means less attention from secondaries. And reports out of Colts camp right now is that him and Luck are looking spectacular. Their chemistry's there. They're connecting. T.Y. Hilton, probably not an exciting pick for a lot of you, but he's very good. I think he's very underrated and overlooked. Anything you want to add to that?
No, I completely agree. All right, guys, so here we got Amari Cooper. Now, the stats are kind of hard to look at Amari Cooper because he went, had some time in Oakland there, and then he gets traded, and he's getting adjusted to the Cowboys offense, and then boom, we finally get the stretch where we get to see what Amari Cooper can do there in Dallas. And so I want to look at some stats just from Dallas. Of course, we're going to cut out the Oakland stats because I just don't think that they matter. And then we're going to even look at weeks 8 through 17 specifically. But he had 8.5 targets per game in his 11 games with Dallas. That's great numbers. That's a lot of targets. You love to see that from a wide receiver. But he made the most of those targets. He had a career high 9.5 yards per target with Prescott under center. That's huge. I love this situation where he comes in this roster with a good quarterback, a good offensive line, a good running game. All they needed was a wideout, and he fills that role. I love this guy because he comes in this position, and he's a clear-cut #1 wide receiver on that roster. There's no arguing it. I think that's one of the biggest reasons we got to rank him here is because there's a safety in this guy who's shown his production. But the numbers get even better. When you look at specifically weeks 8 through 17, he had 76 targets, which was tied for 11th, 53 receptions, also 11th, 725 yards is 10th, 6 touchdowns was tied for 5th in the NFL, and his PPR fantasy points at 158 was 11th over that stretch. Plus, he in 2 playoff games had 7 catches for 106 yards and 6 catches for 65 yards and a touchdown. So really, game after game, the production was there. Now, the overall season totals were low, but of course, like I said, some time in a bad Oakland offense, a couple of games to adjust. The numbers are there. The only thing that keeps him lower on this list, and genuinely the only reason that we wouldn't put him higher, is because Prescott's a good quarterback, but he's not quite as good as some of the other quarterbacks that the wide receivers ahead of him have. He's not quite, I wouldn't quite put him up there with the Phillip Rivers. I wouldn't quite put him up there to Drew Brees, a lot of these other options. And maybe Dak Prescott could be that, but the other thing being is to remember it is a run-first offense. So either Ezekiel Elliott doesn't hold out, either he plays this year and it's a run-first offense, or he doesn't and then offense takes a huge hit. That's really the only reason that he isn't a little bit higher on this list. But I love Amari Cooper. He's one of the safer wide receivers that still has high upside on this choice, or on this kind of this area in rankings.
So I briefly mentioned Stefon Diggs before. I want to get to them. This guy is a very talented wide receiver. In fact, in many ways, compared to Adam Thielen, he might have more raw talent. He's the proverbial if he could stay healthy guy. Let's talk about that. If he could stay healthy, it's always been the case with Stefon Diggs. If he could stay healthy and be on the field, be 100%, what he could do would be amazing. But when he has been healthy, when he's been on the field at 100%, he has produced. He showed great potential immediately coming onto the team as a rookie. Now, if you follow the Vikings closely, and we do, we are Vikings fans. We live in Minnesota, so we get to see a lot of Stefon Diggs there. He's missed a lot of time due to injuries, or he's played a lot of games less than 100%. And really, the thing that's held him back is his health, if he could just stay healthy. I'll give you an example. In 2016, his numbers were a little deceiving there. If you actually begin to break it down, look at some metrics, know the games he was beat up, the games he missed, things like that, he often played hurt or less than 100%. But when he was healthy, before he got injured, he had an amazing stretch there. In fact, he had one stretch before getting hurt that he was actually averaging 10 catches and 121 receiving yards per game. Was really on fire there. That season, had he played 16 games, he would have broke 1,000 receiving yards. He's still young. At age 25, this guy's still got area to develop and improve, and I think it gives him a higher ceiling than a lot of the wide receivers I'm going to talk about in the top 30 there. Vikes signed him to a long-term deal. I love that because, once again, there's things that we don't see behind the scenes that teams do. We can look at metrics, reports, things like that, but we're not there at camp. We're not in the locker room. And so when a team goes out and signs him to a long-term deal, that's a huge vote of confidence. I love that there. He's legitimate. He's never played 16 games. He struggles to stay healthy, and Adam Thielen will take away targets from him. But this guy is seriously good. Kirk Cousins arrives last year. He finally breaks 1,000 yards, and he gets 100 catches and has 9 TDs. That's a really good year. In fact, he's had 17 touchdowns in the last 2 years, but I think that number is actually trending up. If you look at last year, 6 of his touchdowns came in the last 8 games. Really had a connection going there. In 2017, Pro Football Focus rated him as number 7 wide receiver overall. And last year, in 2018, his drop percentage was extremely low. He dropped only 1% of his throws. Now they talk about what's a catchable throw, things like that. We're not going to get into breaking that down, but only 1% of throws that he dropped. That's second in the NFL among qualified wide receivers. I think he's a guy that has a higher ceiling than most guys we've mentioned, but his inability to stay healthy lowers his floor a bit, probably a little bit lower floor than some of the previous 14 guys that we have talked about there. Anything you want to add about Stefon Diggs?
No, I completely agree. That sounds great. All right, so here we got Cooper Kupp. I absolutely love this guy. Now, the first thing I want to address is the health. because last year we're going to talk about his stats, but he didn't play the whole season because he got hurt. Funny thing was, I talked about him in a video about a month or so ago, and I love this guy. I was like, oh, he's so great. I think it was our bold predictions, actually, and I talked about how great he's going to be, and I talked about his stats and all these things, and first comment I get, some guys like, you idiot, he's not healthy, he's not going to play, and it was like, sure enough, hours after we get that comment, reports are coming out, he's practicing, he's out there in pads, he even do a little bit of contact, he's healthy, he's recovering super well. I tell you what, there are a lot of guys I'm nervous about this offseason. You know me, I am more apprehensive about players with injuries than just about anybody else out there. I won't touch them. Cooper Kupp is a guy I'm fine with. I really am fine with him. Now, he is coming back from an injury, and there is Robert Woods and Bradin Cooks and a lot of weapons in that offense, so we did bump him down the rankings because we expect him to have a bit of a slow start to the season. But what you're going to see by the end of the season is that Cooper Kupp is an elite wide receiver, not just an elite fantasy wide receiver, but quite honestly, one of the best quarterback to wide receiver duos in the NFL is Goff to Kupp. Let's look at excuse me, guys. Let's look at some stats. So he played just 7 games last year, but he had 6 touchdowns in those 7 games. That right there is an insane touchdown production. But in 6 of those games, he generated a passer rating of over 110. He, in fact, generated a passer rating of over 149 on the season. That number is absolutely insane. Now, that doesn't compare to other players. He didn't play enough games to qualify for, I guess, the total stats and compare him to players who played a whole year. But the production was there. In fact, he was on pace for 92 catches, 1,300 yards, and 14 touchdowns. That's tier 1 fantasy right there. That's tier 1 in PPR. That's tier 1 in standard. Those numbers are absolutely insane. I believe without a doubt he is the #1 most talented wide receiver on that roster, and when he is fully healthy, he is the #1, the go-to guy, hands down. I really don't know if there's any other way to look at it.
Yeah, I got a man crush on Cooper Kupp. I love this guy. I think he's very underrated. Years from now, we'll look back at he'll become one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. And right now, everything is pointing to him being ready and playing week 1. He's had contact. He's playing some preseason scrimmages. Once again, he's going to play. And you think about coming back from ACL surgery, it's not like it was 20 years ago. It's changed. Great example is Adrian Peterson. Okay, he got injured, and I can't remember what week it was that he I think it was week 12 when he went down towards ACL. That's not a lot of recovery time. It's not like a guy that gets injured at the beginning of the year and he's got the whole off season, the whole regular season never get healed up. Adrian Peterson tears his ACL. He comes back and has his best season by far and has 2,000 yards rushing the year after his ACL surgery. So it just shows they've come so far with that. I love Cooper Kupp. So I'm talking about Bradin Cooks. This is a guy that can't seem to stay on a team. Gets drafted by the Saints, traded to New England, and then traded to the Rams. And all this in spite of the fact that he had 4 consecutive seasons with over 1,000 yards receiving. But I think the guy's finally found a home there. Last year, he had a career best in total yards and yards per game. This former first-round pick is a speedster who loves to stretch the field, but he's more than that. If you actually look at him, he's a very polished wide receiver. First-round pick, he came out of highly touted wide receiver, come out of college there. Now, I think playing for the Rams brings a little bit of pros and cons. I'm here to tell you what I mean by that. Here's the con. His ceiling's a little bit lower because there's so many mouths to feed in that offense there. For example, we talked about, he's going to have Gurley, Cooper Kupp, you got
Robert Woods,
all these guys there. So I think that lowers his value a little bit there. But I also think he's got a much higher floor than most guys out there. And here's why. He's playing in a prolific offense led by Coach McVay, who's very talented. In fact, under his coaching, the Rams have been first and second in NFL in points scored, averaging over 30 points per game in the last 2 years. So once again, lower ceiling because the targets are spread out, but a higher floor playing that great offense there. Now, another reason why I think maybe he's got a little limited ceiling is he's not your prototypical possession receiver. His touchdowns have dropped every year since 2015, but he's very talented. 1,000-yard season, very much doable for this guy there. I think he's a guy that has the type of talent. He'll never be top 5. He's not going to be a possession receiver. He's not going to compete with some of those big guys out there, but he will consistently be in the top 15 to 20 in wide receiver rankings for the next 5 or 6 years there.
All right, so we got Julian Edelman. Now, this is an interesting situation. First, I'm just going to put out the concerns. Over the last 2 seasons, he's missed 20 games. He's playing with an aging Tom Brady, who, to be quite honest, he looked a little bit slower last year. If you look at the tape, he was just missing some throws. He didn't quite look like Tom Brady. And there's a bit of a concern that Brady takes a step down because he's aging and all that. And also the other thing being there's no other good weapons. Gronk is gone. There's no other good wide receiver. I mean, he's going to get attention from defenses. But there is good news. In 3 playoff games last season, he had 26 catches for 388 yards and Super Bowl MVP. During the final 12 games of the season, he had a monster. He had 74 receptions for 850 yards and 6 touchdowns. And in fact, this is crazy, from week 5 onward, he finished 9th in half PPR scoring among wide receivers. And 9th in half PPR scoring. Now, the numbers are insane. This guy is a PPR stud, and he belongs here. He's a guy with a very, very high floor, but because of the concerns, because of his quarterback situations, his recent injuries, and no weapons really to speak of on the rest of that roster in the passing game, you definitely have to keep that ceiling lower. We have to put him here. So this is definitely a situation of philosophy. Do you want to hop up and get a guy like Cooper Kupp? Do you want to get a guy like Bradin Cooks? Do you want to get a guy with a higher ceiling? Or are you going to take a safe pick like Julian Edelman, your number 2 wide receiver? That's all you have to ask yourself in this situation. I think he's a solid pick, and this is exactly where he belongs.
I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on this Allen Robinson pick, and I'm okay. One, opinions are great, but wait, hold your judgment. I want to hear from you when the season's over. This is not the first time we've been bold and predicted things. A lot of people disagreed. Funny thing about it is you always hear the haters when they don't agree with you, but rarely they come back at the end of the day and say, man, we were right. Hear me out on this one. I really think this guy's in for a big season. I'll tell you why. So this is a guy that a few years ago was ranked in the top 10. He crushed in 2015. He had 1,400 yards and 15 touchdowns. He's got a prototypical body you want to see from a wide receiver. He's got speed. He's got every gift that you want there. But he was injured. And he was also hindered by bad quarterback play, Blake Bortles. In fact, that was one of the bold predictions. We came out and said Blake Bortles is a bum. Stay away from this guy. He's not worthy playing last year. A lot of people hate us for that, and we were spot on. So this guy's being held back by injuries and Blake Bortles. He came in 2017, had a great preseason, looked like he was poised for a big year, tears his ACL week 1, in fact, early in that game. But he recovered, signs of big contracts, brought in to become the Bears' #1 wide receiver, and last year he had an average year. He had 754 yards and 4 TDs, so why do I have him ranked so high? Okay, I think this guy potentially could have a wide receiver 1 or tier 1 rating. I think he's a guy who has a potential to be in the top 10. I really do. Consider this, he's only 26 years old. That's still really young. Last year's recovered from ACL surgery, but on top of that, he's learned a new offense with a new coach and a young quarterback that, by the way, if you look at Mitch Trubisky, he didn't start a lot of games in college, so that's a project in the making. So everything was working against him having a big year. He lists a lot of preseason time. They talked about injuries and recovery, and he had some hamstring stuff going on. He had a lot of things that kind of set him back. He missed valuable reps to learn the new offense and get timing down with Mitch Trubisky. Here's what Coach Nagy said about him. Okay, being with him that whole year in this past OTAs, at practice, at meetings, he's one of the top players I've ever coached. Love hearing that, right?
Yeah.
Went on to say, Robinson said, I didn't start running routes until later in the summer. So he's saying because of my surgery, I wasn't even working on route running, getting timing down. He said, but now I've had a whole year, whole OTAs, off season. I'm healthy. I've been able to train. My timing's down. This is definitely going to be different than it was last year. I believe that. General manager Ryan Pace saw a different player in the offseason workouts. Speaking of Allen Robinson. He said it's going to carry over to the practice field this year. I think you can see in his route running, he's more explosive in his breaks, in and out of his cuts. For his size, he's a natural route runner. So already they see he's more explosive than he was last year. But it's not just that. If you look at his last 8 games, okay, in his last 8 games last year, things really came together for him. He was healthy. They were building chemistry. He actually finished in the top 10 in Pro Football Focus as wide receiver rating during that stretch. During those 8 games, he averaged 76.5 receiving yards. Over 16 games, that would turn out to be 1,224 yards. He averaged 5 catches during that same stretch per game. That's 80 catches over 16. Once again, his last 8 games, he was a different wide receiver there. He seems fully recovered from ACL surgery. He's developing nice chemistry with Mitch Trubisky. And even last year in the preseason, we said that we liked him more in 2019 than we did in 2018. So that was kind of our prediction last year. We'll see if we were right about that. Here's the other thing I like about where he's at. You look at Nagy and Trubisky. Okay, that offense is continuing to improve. I think that's going to help Allen's value. The Bears' offense went from 29th in the NFL to 9th with Nagy taking over there. So once again, I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this. Here's the beauty of this pick, though. I like this guy. I think he's got potentially tier 1 talent. I think if everything falls into place, he can end up top 10 or 15. But his average draft position is much lower. So just because I haven't ranked that doesn't mean that's when you got to take him. You could actually let him fall a little bit and grab him as your number 3 guy. Yet he could put out number 1 or number 2 wide receiver stats for your team. Anything you want to add?
No, I completely agree with you. That's bold, and you're going to get a lot of hate. But hey, as long as they're not hating on me, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
All right, so here we got Kenny Golladay. This guy's young and he's exciting. He comes out of a pretty mediocre rookie season, but you could tell that he showed some talent that year, right? And sure enough, really, we started to see some things that year. Sure enough, it really produced in 2018. He had 70 receptions, over 1,000 yards, and 5 touchdowns. The numbers were there. In fact, numbers were there even more because he was producing things on his own and really making plays with his athleticism. In fact, he finished 7th in receptions of 15 yards or more. Fact of the matter is, Kenny Golladay is a playmaker. He learns how to make some big plays. He's very athletic. In fact, people are calling him Mini Megatron. I love that nickname. He's a very talented wide receiver. We got to address the concerns. Now, I'm not going to talk much about this player because, quite honestly, guys, the situation is simple. He is a talented wide receiver in a very untalented and unproductive offense in a very tough division. Even Green Bay made some adjustments. They got to play the Vikings twice. They got to play the Bears twice. There's a lot of things to be nervous about there. As well as the fact that Matthew Stafford is a quarterback who loves to spread the ball out. He throws to 4, 5, 6 different wide receivers every game. He throws to 2 or 3 tight ends, and he throws to probably 7 different running backs. I don't know what it is about Detroit. They love to throw out of the backfield. And so that's something that's seriously going to hurt him. What's going to happen is he's really the only truly talented guy in that offense as far as targets goes. I think he's going to see a lot of attention, and I think that's a major concern, especially when you combine that with a quarterback that loves to spread the ball out. You take a quarterback like Matthew Stafford, he's mature. He looks over to the left, he sees Kenny Golladay. Yeah, that's his top wide receiver, but he also sees a number 1 cornerback and a solid safety over top. He's going to look for a weakness in the defense somewhere else, and I think he's going to lose a lot of targets to the attention that he's going to get. Kenny Golladay could be a top tier. He could be a great wide receiver. He could be in the top 20. He could be very, very good. But the reason that I don't think he's going to be in the top 15 or he's not going to be a lot higher than he is now is simply because of that offense. That's what's hurting him. That offense is a major kind of hindrance for him right now. But that's Kenny Golladay for you. I love this guy in the future. He's a great dynasty, a great keeper. But as of right now, we got to keep him here.
Yeah. You know, the thing about him, you look back to his rookie year there, he was behind Jones and Tate. So that kind of held him back a little bit. But we definitely saw some things on athleticism, some plays he was making. You tell he was very talented. The only thing that hurt him last year a little bit statistically is that Golden Tate was there for 7 games. Now Golden Tate's gone. So it's just more targets. You're right. I don't think he's in a prolific offense. Like that hurts a little bit. He's going to see some tough cornerbacks. But he's clearly the number 1 guy who should see more targets this year than he saw last year there. So. Okay, we've got some metrics, things I want to share with you guys. I am huge on Chris Godwin. We were last year. Don't sleep on this guy. Okay, now he made huge strides from season 1 to season 2. He went from catches from 34 to 59, yards 525 to 842, and touchdowns from 1 to 7. His quarterback rating when thrown to as a rookie was 85. It went to 111 last year. So, I mean, very huge upgrades there. We loved him as a rookie. We loved him going into last year, and he made some really solid gains there. But the numbers that he made, the improvements that he made, were actually better if you consider a few things there. They had a very crowded wide receiver depth chart. If you look at, they had a lot of mouths to feed. Okay, first of all, you got Mike Evans. This guy's a stud. Then you add to that, of course, you got Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries, tight end Howard. That's just a lot of guys to get a lot of targets and mouths to feed there. Well, now Jackson's gone and Humphries are gone. He's clearly the number 2 guy there. In fact, it's funny. I was watching some camp coverage today, and they asked Mike Evans who the number 2 wide receiver was there, and he kind of paused, looked strange. He said, well, it's obviously Chris Godwin, no doubt. And then he went one further, and he said, you know what? Actually, Chris Godwin's pushing me to become the number 1 guy. I think that's a huge statement by Mike Evans there. Okay, so Adam's gone. You look at Adam Humphries is gone. Deshaun Jackson's gone. I like the situation that he's in there. The fact that they let him go also shows that they trust Chris Godwin quite a bit there. Now, the reason why I like his situation is Tampa Bay's defense is porous. 31st last year in points allowed. Now that defense will improve, but they're still going to be in the bottom third, I should say. Bottom Thor.
In the bottom Thor.
Third, fourth, yeah, whatever. The bottom third, which means they're going to have to throw the ball a lot to stay competitive. In his rookie season, 2017, Pro Football Focus rated him as the number 11th wide receiver. That's great marks. He didn't realize his rating that he had. They take a lot of things into account when they give that rating out, but he was number 11th wide receiver. His last 2 games as a rookie gave a glimpse of what he can do. His last 2 games as a rookie, he had one game, 7 catches, 111 yards and a touchdown, and another game where he had 6 catches, 98 yards. That's a glimpse of his talent there. Very talented. He's athletic. He shows toughness in traffic. He's known to have great work ethic there. Listen to this. New coach Bruce Arians said, this guy's going to have a breakout year. He says, I see Godwin as a guy who's going to have 100 catches this year, and he will never come off the field. I love hearing that. Glowing reports coming out of him about this preseason. Another thing I like about the situation with Mike Evans, we mentioned him a couple times, Mike Evans is clearly the number one guy there. We talked about him. He's in our top 10, very talented, which means Chris Godwin is not going to see a lot of double teams. You'll see the team's number 2 corners quite often there. Pro Football Focus talked about the 23-year-old Penn State product. He hauled in 54.5% of contested catch opportunities since coming into the league. That ranks 5th among 49 wide receivers with at least 30 opportunities. Once again, this guy goes up, he gets in traffic. Pro Football Focus also noted that Godwin's 2-year overall grade of 84.5 ranks 15th among 186 qualified wide receivers. And think about this. Over the last 10 years, when Coach Bruce Arians, I would get his name mixed up there, but if you look at Coach Arians, number 2 wide receiver, right? They've averaged 104.3 targets per season. His number 2 wide receivers have produced great numbers there. Prime example is John Brown, who had over 1,000 yards receiving in 2015, and Michael Floyd in 2013, who have 1,000 yards. So in his offense, the number 2 wide receivers often are very productive. Once again, everything's pointing to this guy having a huge year. Any thoughts on Chris Godwin?
Well, I completely agree with that. Like I mentioned when we talked about Mike Evans, Bruce Arians was the coach with Carson Palmer through 35 touchdown passes. You talked about Bruce Arians. That coaching staff change is going to be huge. What we saw what Sean McVay has done to the Rams, we've seen what's happened to the Bears with their coaching staff is huge. But I love what you were talking about, those guys. I mean, Floyd, quite honestly, he's not a good wide receiver. Can you imagine what Bruce Arians is going to be able to do with like a guy like Godwin, who is actually a talented number 2 wide receiver? I think this is a great situation, and I fully expect him to go over 1,000 yards this year.
All right. So that's the end of the video there. We'd love to hear your comments, thoughts, subscribe, share, hit the notification button. The other thing is watch for our Tier 3 coming out real soon. Also, you're going to release a video in a couple days about our upcoming leagues, right?
Yeah, so that's what we're going to have, guys. We're going to have our community league coming out. Sorry, it's super late, so we're going to try to hurry up and rush this out and get all the information out there. But it is pretty simple and easy to throw together, so that, I guess, comes in on the bright side. But make sure to keep an eye out for that, and all the information will be in that video.
All right, thanks for joining us, and God bless.